Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar on how to apply for the Division of Arts and Culture 2027-2029 Cultural Facilities Grants. I am Sam Brown, the Arts Administrator for the division. On the call with me now is Terry Abstein. I think that's the only one from the division. But we hope today's session will be helpful as you prepare your cultural facilities applications. Recordings of this and all other webinars will be posted to our YouTube channel and website. A PDF of the slides will also be posted on our website. Most importantly, the biggest thing we need to remember for today is that the deadline to apply is July 10th, 2026 at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everything needs to be in by that point. Applications will be reviewed by the panel in October at our October meeting, and if eligible, there will be a list of applications that are eligible that will be submitted to the legislature in spring of 2027 for funding considerations. Any funds awarded will be available come July 1st of 2027. The applications and guidelines are now available on our website at dos.myflorida.com/cultural. Today, we will touch on some of the highlights from the guidelines, which we thoroughly encourage you to read the guidelines before doing anything else in this process. We will discuss the definition of a cultural facility, eligibility and program requirements, and of course, any major restrictions to it. We'll cover matching and state fund requirements, the budget and scope of work, required support materials, review criteria and scoring, and also restrictive covenants. Then we will talk about the funding timeline and provide some tips for a successful application. Finally, we will have the opportunity for questions and answers. So again, please carefully review the guidelines and contact us with any questions if you have any after today's webinar. Throughout the webinar, please feel free to use our chat, and Terry will hopefully be getting in those and answering those as we're going over everything.
I will, everyone. I'll keep up as best I can. And also, I wanted to mention Sandy Shaughnessy, our director, is on.
Oh, I didn't see that. Hi, Sandy. Welcome. Welcome. So sorry about that. All righty.
Hi,
And also,
everyone. I was just saying hi.
wonderful. Also, please keep your sound muted and video disabled. That makes everything go much more smoothly as we go through this. Let's get started. Throughout today's webinar, like I said, we want you to submit any comments or questions you have through the chat feature. We'll make sure we get to them to answer your questions during the question and answer period at the end. All right. Let's talk about culture facilities grant applications. Like all of our applications are submitted to dosgrants.com. If you are new to DOS Grants, you might want to visit our Using the DOSGrants.com playlist on YouTube for helpful video tutorials on all things DOS Grants. I think that's the fourth time I've said DOS Grants in the last couple of minutes. But here's another time. Something to remember about dosgrants.com is that individuals may not apply, may not apply for cultural facilities grants, so you must complete an application for your organization. To do this, you must be associated with an organization. Each individual person who uses the system should register for their own account in the system rather than having a single account for everyone at your organization. If you need assistance associating with an organization, please contact us and we can help you out with that. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a culture facility, as we use the term, is a building where the programming, production, presentation, and/or exhibition of any of the arts and cultural disciplines are carried out. And the disciplines are actually defined by Florida statute and are here on the screen for you. And they include things like music, dance, theater, photography, crafts, media arts, and museums. To be eligible to apply for a cultural facilities grant, the applicant organization must be a public entity governed by a city or a county or a nonprofit tax-exempt Florida corporation, and the organization hasn't received $1.5 million through the Cultural Facilities Program during the previous 5 state fiscal years. Once you hit 1.5, you have to wait 5 years. Your facility and organization must be open to all members of the public without discrimination. And organizations may not have multiple active cultural facility projects under contract at one time. Cultural facility grants are for 23 months. So if your grant is funded, you shouldn't submit a new application that next year. Subject to legislative appropriation and governor approval, cultural facility applications are funded top down, the ranked list, until the appropriation is depleted. Any applicant on the ranked list that has not completed a previously funded culture facilities project by July 1st, 2027 will be passed over, and the funds will be allocated to the next application on the list without an active cultural facilities project under contract with the division. Additional eligibility requirements are listed and discussed in the guidelines. The cultural facilities program is for bricks and mortar construction, renovation, or for acquisition, but no combination of the three. Funding may not be used for parking facilities, sidewalks, walkways, trails, or landscaping. If part of your project includes these things, that is permissible, but they may not be the entirety of the grant project. We also don't fund design, construction, or fabrication of exhibits that are not part of a permanent building. This restriction may not necessarily apply to zoos. Check with us prior to submitting your application and we'll take a look. Other no-nos include general operating costs such as salaries, travel, personnel, office supplies, mortgage or rent, overhead, or indirect costs. Additionally, all funds must be expended during the grant period, so we don't fund reimbursement of costs paid prior to the execution of the agreement or after the granting period has ended. No debts, contingencies, fines, penalties, interest, or things like that. No travel, entertainment, food, plaques, awards, or scholarships. No regranting, no contributions, and no donations. And of course, we cannot provide funds for projects restricted to private or exclusive participation. Applicants must have undisturbed use of the land or buildings by either being the owner of the land and/or building, or by having a fully executed lease agreement with the owner of the land and/or building for at least 10 years from the date of the execution of the grant award agreement. This is important because the applicant is required to retain ownership of all improvements made under the grant. You will need to submit an organization audit or financial statement that shows the total revenue and support for the last completed fiscal year. You will also need to submit architectural plans signed by a licensed architect or engineer, clearly indicating scope of work. For purposes of the application, plans need only be at the schematic design phase. If architectural plans are not required for the project, contractor project proposals or working drawings must be provided. Again, you must include architect, contractor, or builder estimates with the documentation of your application. This is a separate upload. Lastly, you will need to submit support letters from local officials, community groups, and community members in support of the project. Original letters that are signed and current are better than form letters. And I can assure you that the panelists really look at these letters, particularly if your funding comes from a single source like a city or county budget. Surveys and other constituent input can also be included as an additional attachment. The program does not fund the planning phase because the project should be planned before the applicant applies. So the project can be completed within the 23-month timeframe. It also does not fund operational support. Applicants of projects that are intended to restore or preserve an historic structure should apply to the Division of Historical Resources within the Bureau of Historic Preservation. Projects funded by the legislator outside the review of the Florida Council on Arts and Culture are not eligible for cultural facilities grants for the same scope of work within that same fiscal year. We cannot accept more than one cultural facilities application under a single application deadline for the same facility, project, or site. Commercial property is not permitted, but coffee shops, cafes, and gift shops that support the operations of the organization are allowed. If the applicant is leasing the property, the owner of the property must be a public entity governed by a state, city, county, or a profit tax exempt Florida corporation. Properties owned by individuals or private corporations are not eligible for cultural facility grants. The division offers two levels of funding within the cultural facilities program. The first level of funding is for purpose-built or single-use facilities that will be used solely for the programming, production, presentation, or exhibition of any of the arts and cultural disciplines at least 85% of the time. This type of facility includes theaters, performance centers, museums, including aquariums, botanical gardens, history centers, zoos, etc., and art centers. The maximum request amount for this type of facility is $500,000. The second level of funding is for multi-purpose facilities that will be used for the programming, production, presentation, or exhibition of any of the arts and culture disciplines less than 85% of the time. This type of building includes community centers, recreation centers, civic centers, municipal buildings. The maximum request amount for this type of facility is $200,000. Project costs must be directly related to the arts and cultural portion of the facility. There is no minimum request amount for either level. So, grant funds must be matched by the grantee. The amount of required match is based on the applicant's operating budget for the last completed fiscal year, which means applicants with an annual budget of $1 million or less, or that have a ready waiver, must match 1-to-1. And applicants with an annual budget greater than $1 million must match 2-to-1. So for every dollar that you ask for, you should be able to match it with $2 of your own. What is READY? The Rural Economic Development Initiative represents a coordinated effort for programs and services for rural areas. Match for projects within READY counties or communities is 1-to-1. To receive a READY waiver, the applicant must submit a letter from the county government that, must submit a letter from the county government that acknowledges the application and certifies the county or community has a READY designation. The letter from the county must be submitted with the application. All right, types of match. At least 25% of your match must be cash on hand, and you will need to provide bank statements. Irrevocable pledges that are documented and verifiable can be up to 75% of the match for your project. Pledges must be signed, dated, and indicate when the funds will be available in the future. Pledged funds must be available to be expended during the grant period. Any pledges already received should be included in your verifiable cash on hand. A letter from your board stating that they will raise funds is not the same thing as an irrevocable pledge. The money must have already been raised. In-kind contributions that are documented and verifiable can make up to 25% of your match. Documentation for these must indicate professional expertise and market cost of the contribution. The donor must certify this. In-kind contributions might include things like a discount given by a contractor or the donation of materials from a vendor. Please include a spreadsheet with itemized pledges and in-kind amounts and totals in addition to the documented source of funds. Documentation of all matches required at the time of application submission. Cash match must be in a restricted account that is separate from your general operating account. You are required to provide a detailed budget for your project that breaks down into specific construction categories. Here are some questions about your project budget that will help you determine if you are ready to submit an application. What is the total cost of the project? What are the budget category options specific to your project? Which budget categories will use state funds? Which budget categories will use matching funds? How realistic is your budget? Have you consulted with an architect? What about a contractor? Can you complete the project in the 23-month timeline? This 23-month timeline is very important. It must be done within the timeline. Do you have any non-allowable budget categories or planned expenditures? If all of these questions have not been answered, chances are you may not complete the project on time, which is not allowed. Please be sure to ask yourself these questions before beginning your application. Let's see. All right, the budget line items will be listed by budget category in the application. On the screen, you will see the categories that all costs may be assigned to. It is important that you are very specific. Proposal budgets that are vague do not tell the panel exactly what the funds will be used for. Having a single line item under site construction that says construction $500,000 can indicate that you are not prepared to complete the project. It is understandable that you may only have estimates and costs will change by the time the grant is funded, but please remember to be as specific as you can be. You will also want to be as specific as you can with the scope of work. All items in the scope of work should be completed within the grant period and within the budget. As an example, your scope of work could say something like, grant and match funds will be used to renovate the interior, front and back of House XYZ Theater. Work to be completed includes replace stage rigging, replace lighting, including lighting board, replace sound system, replace curtains, and replace seating. If, excuse me, if your building is 50 years or older, you will be required to provide information to the Bureau of Historic Preservation, and BHP must approve your project plans before submission of your application. For questions, please consult the guidelines or BHP directly. You must upload a copy of the BHP determination letter that indicates no adverse effect to the historical, architectural, or archaeological value of the property. If BHP determines that your project will have adverse effects, you will not be eligible to receive funds from the Department of State for the project. This requirement includes structures where the intent is demolition. Required support materials must be uploaded and submitted with your grant application in the online system by the 5 p.m. deadline on July 10th. We accept only support materials that have been uploaded into the online application system. Materials that are mailed to the division will not be accepted, mailed or emailed, and will not be forwarded to the panel. For cash on hand, provide a bank statement expressly for this project, not a general operating bank account. It should be the latest statement before the deadline to apply. In-kind contributions may not be from volunteers. Contributors must be professionals such as plumbers, carpenters, or etc. Documentation must indicate professional expertise in market costs and be certified by the donor. Signed and dated irrevocable pledges are required. Pledged funds must be available to be expended during the grant period. Leases must be signed by both parties and dated. Leases must clearly indicate term or expiration date. Please highlight within the document and/or indicate the page number where the term or expiration date is located in a cover letter. Resolutions or local government meeting minutes must be signed, dated, and indicate when the funds will be available. We have posted on the Culture Facilities page of the Division of Arts and Culture website 2 attachment requirement checklists. One is for renovation and new construction projects. The other is specific to acquisition projects. These will help you as you gather the required documentation. A current substitute W-9 is required at the time of application submission. A copy of your substitute W-9 can be obtained at flvendor.myfloridacfo.com. This is specific to the state of Florida and is different from the regular W-9 utilized by the federal government. One of the most common application errors is the submission of the wrong document for the substitute W-9. The substitute W-9 that we require looks like the image on the right. This document is required by financial services for them to process payments. Be sure to verify that all the information is correct on your substitute W-9. Optional support materials are, like they say, optional and not required, but they may be helpful to the panel as they evaluate your application. If you choose to include them, they should help tell the story of your organization, the community you serve, and the project that you are putting forth. Again, these materials are not required, but panelists may consider them helpful, so if you choose to include them, please follow these rules for submission. They will only be accepted if uploaded into the online system. You may consider combining multiple documents into one file to upload. For example, if you are submitting flyers and brochures, you can combine all of them into one document rather than uploading them separately. You should do this with your support letters as well so that they are considered one item in the grant system. Do not try to upload videos. Instead, provide a document with links to them. Please do not upload multiple copies of any of the material into the application system. And last but not least, you should plan to upload your support materials in advance of the deadline to ensure that you don't have any last-minute technical difficulties on the day of the deadline. The accepted file formats include PDFs and text documents, JPEGs, GIFs, PNGs, and TIFFs. Mac OS productivity files such as pages, keynotes, and numbers are not acceptable formats. Please save these file types in PDF format before submission. All right, let's take a look at the review criteria and scoring. All eligible applications will be reviewed by the members of the Florida Council on Arts and Culture, which serves as the review panel for cultural facilities. They will score each application on 3 criteria. The need for project and project impact includes your description of the arts and cultural programming, production, and administration of your facility. The operating forecast and the project's impact. This is worth up to 45 points. The scope of work includes a detailed description of the project and its desired results. This section is worth up to 30 points. Finally, worth up to 25 points is the project budget and matching funds category, which includes budget expenses and income, the matching fund statement, and the project team. All 3 parts comprise a total 100 possible points. The panelists will score the grant applications based on the information you provide in the application, including attachments and additional data provided by staff. The panel members' individual ratings will be averaged to determine the final score for each application. When you write your grant, you should be asking and attempting to answer questions that will support what you hope to accomplish with the funding you're applying for. What will the facility be used for? How is it being used? Why is your project needed? How will it impact your community? What are you going to do? Build or renovate what exactly? Purchase what exactly? Be specific as if you were speaking to a contractor. What are the elements of the construction or renovation? How are you going to pay for it? Have you identified the expenses in the budget categories? Do the budget categories cover all the items in your scope of work? Who is your project team? We have posted on the Cultural Facilities page of the Division of Arts and Culture website some tips for writing the narrative section of your grant. The division will review each application and verify that the appropriate documentation has been submitted and that it meets all minimum requirements. If necessary, a request for clarification will be sent with a deadline for submission. This is the only time that documents will be considered after the application deadline. These requests are not for additional documentation, but to clarify information that has already been submitted in the application. Clarifications will become an official part of the application. We will provide the panel with a synopsis of the proposed scope of work, including an assessment of the proposed timeline and how the scope of work compares to the applicant's previously funded cultural facilities projects. The panelists will also receive a summary of all the applicants' previously awarded cultural facilities grants and fixed capital outlay line item grants, including their completion status and history of management by the applicant. In addition, we will include the requested clarifications, applicant compliance history, and an assessment of the proposed budget, including match contributions with recommendations for any grant funding level adjustments that may be justified by the findings of the review. Looking ahead, if your cultural facility application is funded, please keep in mind the scope of work may not be altered from what was presented in your application. The project that was recommended for funding by the Florida Council on Arts and Culture may not change. If the proposed scope of work is no longer feasible at the time funding becomes available, you will need to submit a new application for a subsequent cycle. All grantees are required to record either a restrictive covenant or purchase a surety bond. More on these in the next slide. Work may not be completed and expenditures may not be made before the funding becomes available on July 1st, 2027. Grantees must demonstrate a competitive procurement process for goods and services. Grantees are required to submit for review and approval any contracts for the project prior to execution of said contract. And please be sure that all contracts include the required non-discrimination clause. It can be something as simple as this, excuse me. Non-discrimination policy. XYZ Contractors Incorporated will not discriminate against any employee employed under this contract or against any applicant for employment because of race, religion, gender, national origin, age, disability, or marital status. These last two are not new requirements, but will be more closely monitored than they have been in the past. What are restrictive covenants? It is important to note that restrictive covenants are required for cultural facility grants. Florida statute for this program requires that all cultural facilities grantees/property owners must sign and record a restrictive covenant on the property or purchase a surety bond. To purchase a surety bond for 10 years is very expensive and thus cost prohibitive. The restrictive covenant is a lien on the property and ensures the property will be used as a cultural facility for 10 years after the state of the grant award agreement is fully executed. After the date, I'm sorry, of the grant award agreement is fully executed. If the facility is not used as a cultural facility for 10 years, a prorated portion of the funds must be returned to the state. Restrictive covenants are prepared by the division and are signed, notarized, and recorded with the local county clerk's office by the grantee and owners once funding has been made available. The property owner must be made aware that this is a requirement for the distribution of funds. Please mark your calendars for these important dates regarding the timeline for the 2027-2029 grants. The guidelines and application are now available. The application deadline is July 10th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Applications must be submitted via the online grant application at dosgrants.com, and support materials must be uploaded by the deadline. During July, eligibility of all submitted applications will be confirmed. The Cultural Facilities panels will meet on October 8th, 2026. Tentatively, this year's panel will be in person in Polk County, weather and circumstances pending. Of course, we will announce details on that later. Sometime in early 2027, the legislature will decide potential funding appropriations. Please keep in mind that no budget is final until it is signed by the governor, and the grant period for funded grants will begin on July 1st of 2027. This is a screenshot of the application template in dosgrants.com. Please save each page of the application before moving forward. You will find the save button on both the top and the bottom of each page. Once you click save on a page, you will either see an error message in red next to a question or a check mark next to the section you have just completed. We highly recommend resolving any error messages before moving on to the next section. The system will not let you submit the application until all the error messages are resolved, and doing it page by page is a lot better than going back through the whole thing trying to find where the problems are located. All right. And now some tips. Let's see. Please read through the guidelines before beginning your application. You are even required to certify that you have read the guidelines as part of the application. Quality, not quantity, is important, not only for support materials, but also in preparing your answers to the application questions. Answer only the questions that are asked. Be specific to the project that you are requesting funding for. Use a word processing program like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and then copy and paste your text into the online application. This way you won't lose your answers if the internet or power goes out, and you will have a backup copy of your answers. This allows you to work on your application over time before submitting it. You will also be able to check the word count before you insert it into the online system. It is best to paste plain text into the text boxes and format within the system. Otherwise, it will sometimes insert characters that you do not intend. This is especially true for apostrophes and other special characters and other special formatting. Application text boxes will not support the insertion of photos. If you have photos that you would like to share with the panel, prepare a single document, sort of like a photo essay, to upload as an optional attachment. If you do try to insert photos into the application text boxes, your text will be lost. Review your application for typographical and grammatical errors. Have someone unfamiliar with your program or project read your application before submitting. If they understand it, it means you are making your case. They can help catch spelling and grammar errors for you and do other things to help you make sure it's the best application possible. Please be absolutely certain you review the application review page carefully. Remember that panelists have many applications to review. When writing, put yourself in the panelist's shoes. Be clear and concise. Include information and support materials that will make your application memorable, and write your application in a way that a non-specialist can understand. Consider the review criteria detailed in the guidelines and the tips provided in the Division of Arts and Culture website. You may want to consider your previous applications, but don't just copy from them. Your prior applications may be a starting point, but you don't want to risk losing points by accidentally including information from a previous year that does not relate to the current project. We are interested in knowing what will be built when the project is complete, so please be very specific about that. Finally, be sure to participate in the panel meeting. If you can't be there in person, you and or someone else from your organization should join the meeting virtually so you are represented. Make sure that either you or your representative, that you're fully versed in the grant application and you can give updates to the panelists when they ask for them. Have access to your application during the meeting, preferably a printed hard copy, and respond to any questions you ask. And if you think if you think there's something wrong, like a panelist may be on the wrong application or you have some other procedural type concern, address the panel chair so it can be cleared up right away. All right. Which leads us to the question and answers. But before we get to your questions, I just want to mention one final thing. Please remember that all project activities must be in strict accordance with all applicable federal, state, and local laws. And grant activities that do not demonstrate compliance with federal, state, and local laws will not be funded. And now that we have concluded the presentation portion of today's webinar, we will turn our attention to your questions.
Hey everyone, this is Terry. I just thought I would answer the question that's here in the chat verbally. You do actually need to tell us where your project is going to take place because we have to look up ownership to see if it actually could be eligible, as properties do have to be owned by a city, county, or nonprofit organization. So you do actually have to know where it's going to be located at time of application. However, it can be either a standalone building or within a plaza. That doesn't matter. What we're really looking for is the ownership and whether you are actually able to proceed with the project. And there's also a question, can you submit a cultural facilities application and general program support application? Yes, you can. The rule is either GPS or SCP, and then you can do cultural facilities as well as one of those. When is the panel facilities review meeting date and time, please? It is tentatively scheduled for October 8th, correct, Sam?
Correct.
All right. And location and time to be announced, weather and circumstances permitting. We may have a scheduling conflict, but right now it is tentatively scheduled Polk County, October 8th. Is it reasonable to expect that a BHP approval letter could be attained by the deadline? That's a very, very good question. So, for properties that are 50 years old or older that are required to get the BHP letter, that demonstrates there's no ill effects. You might not be able to get that by the deadline. And we do understand that. If that's the case and you don't have it by the deadline, upload instead the correspondence and whatever information you provided to them so that we know that that letter is in process.
Terry, this is Sandy. I see a question from Anne Marie. if you are a friends group working with a refuge and renovation will happen at the refuge, can we still apply? We fund the renovations.
Okay, hold on. I'm wrapping my brain
Okay.
around that question.
Yeah,
So it's the
and Marie, I think you could unmute yourself if you want to explain that question a little bit better.
well, and if not, that's fine. So the Anne Marie,
Hello.
hi.
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 Okay. And it's actually Angeli. I'm just happened to
Oh,
be on her account.
okay.
So we're the nonprofit Friends of the Refuge. So we do all of their fundraising. We handle a lot of the programming and the projects there because they're a federal entity,
Okay.
but we are the nonprofit arm of it. So I just wanted to make sure that, when we're doing the renovations for their museum and visitor center, that we would still be eligible to apply.
Yes, you would be.
Okay, great.
Yes. That's a really great question. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So if your building isn't 50 years old or older, there is not a validation on that question, and so you won't have any trouble submitting the application without that documentation. Or at least it shouldn't be. Last time I went through it, it wasn't there. And if by chance it is, you can just upload a document that says, my building is not 50 years or older, and I'm not required to have this, but it should be fine. It shouldn't stop you from submitting. Jennifer Spicer.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. So we have a request to go back to the question that says what happens if we don't have a building location available to submit for approval prior to the deadline? And can it be a standalone building or within a plaza? Jennifer, if you want to unmute yourself, Jennifer Spicer, and ask the part you missed.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All righty. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Um, my question is, I've been doing a little research on properties,
Mm-hmm.
and it's been pretty difficult because either the realtor is not available, the owner is not available. What happens if we have an eye on one property and we don't get to the deadline? How does that work?
So it wouldn't work. You would have to have a lease signed to submit with the application. So you would have to know where it's going because we have to determine whether or not the
Yeah.
property itself is eligible based on ownership.
Okay. And the property, does it have to be for purchase to acquire it?
No,
Or
it doesn't have to be purchased. You can lease a property, but the person who own or the entity that owns the property has to be city, county, state, or another nonprofit organization. Because the state doesn't fund improvements to real property owned by private entities.
excellent. Okay. Thank you
Make
so much.
sense? Yeah, of course.
I appreciate it.
Sure. All right.
It looks like that's all of them, Terry. Unless I'm
Okay.
missing one.
Oh, wait, here's one. Our city owns the facility, but is rented to an operating organization as part of a long-term lease agreement. Should we submit support revenue from the operator? You can if you want to, but as long as the city is willing to sign the restrictive covenant as the owner, um, the revenue from the operator shouldn't affect your application. There's a question, if the building is old, but it isn't designated historic, do historic requirements still apply? Yes, you still actually have to get the letter from DHR. They have to review it. All right.
All right.
Anything else?
Thank you very much, Terry, for stepping in and providing those absolutely wonderful answers. And it feels like we might be approaching.
And Sam, do you have your contact information on a slide? If not, maybe oh, there you go.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was going there. I was heading there. I was heading there. I promise. I would like to remind everyone that recordings of all webinars will be posted to our YouTube channel and the division website, as well as a PDF of the slides will be posted on the website. We thank you for participating in today's webinar and for all your efforts in furthering arts and culture in Florida. Please remember that applications are due no later than 5 p.m. Eastern on July 10th, 2026. If you have any problems with the website, the online system, or if you just have questions about the content of your application, please consult the guidelines and/or contact us. The application for the 2027-2029 cycle is now open. Please be sure to visit our website to access the guideline information and check the calendar on the website for any upcoming meetings and webinars. And that's it. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you and
Thank
goodbye.
you.